YouTube, and here we are live. Welcome to Shalom's Unsnobby Music Hobby Podcast, where we do all kinds of things, but mostly live music. And we're going to start with our prayer as usual. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. We're going to say the Hail Mary in Latin. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. I had another prayer I wanted to do, but I gotta zoom it in. My God, I would see thee loved by all. Happy should I be, could I but shed my blood that all might love thee. He who loves thee is not blind indeed. My God, give him thy light. Miserable indeed are they who love not thee, the sovereign good. My God, let me never be one of those wretched ones who love thee not. My God, be thou my joy and all my good. I would be wholly thine forever. Who shall separate me from thy holy love? Come all ye creatures, love ye my God. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about a little bit of Catholic kind of theology, Catholic ideas. For all of you who might not know, I am Catholic, and this is a Catholic musical podcast, so sometimes I talk about Catholic subjects. And today we're going to be talking about a problem that I was kind of having. But before we get into that, I want to, a couple of updates, couple of announcements for anybody who listens regularly. First update, I want to start doing something more of a more consistent show. So I want to have like my main idea for doing this podcast was to have a live music podcast because I love playing live music and, I love entertaining people for the glory of God with my piano skills. So, they aren't that great, but I'm trying to get better every day. And that's another reason for doing this podcast, to improve my piano skills, improve my creativity, and to play live music for people. So, one thing that I wanted to kind of switch to doing is have a musical podcast that is like a kind of a concert, 30-minute concert every day. That's going to be at probably the same, hopefully it'll be able to be at the same time every day. And then I want to have extras of things that kind of are on my mind, but it doesn't really fit in with the live music thing. So currently what I've been doing is just doing whatever I want on the podcast, whatever I want on social media, and that's good as far as creativity is concerned because I'm coming up with new different things all the time and trying to relate them all. But what I think I want to do is give it more structure. So what I'm going to do is have a 30 minutes always musical, basically live concert that I want to do every day. And then I want to have extras, or I don't know if I should call it behind the scenes or pre-concert or whatever. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but that's going to be basically anything I want it to be. Could be a movie review, could be a talk about theology, could be a book reading, could be an interview with somebody. So That way I'll be able to fit in all the other extra things without interfering with the main idea, which is live music, relaxing music that will be able to help people relax. It will give me an opportunity to play live music, and it will all be for the greater glory of God. So my new idea, like I was saying, was to do more of the concert every day, 30 minutes, and then to do kind of a behind the scenes extra, which will be my thoughts, my ideas, movie reviews, whatever. Today, I wasn't able to start that because I just came up with the idea today, but in the future, I'm gonna do it that way so that when people are tuning in, they know, okay, if I tune in at 8, from 8 to 8:30, I'm just gonna get relaxing music, and then from, I don't know, I haven't decided how to do it yet, but maybe from like 8:30 to 9, you'll get the extras, the behind the scenes stuff. Or maybe it'll be vice versa. From 8 to 8:30, you'll get the behind the scenes, and from 8:30 to 9, you'll get the concert every day. So I'm undecided, but I'm working on it because I know some people are tuning in and they're getting different stuff every day. They're like, what's going on? Like, why is he making a beat today? Why is he just playing the piano today? Why is he talking about Catholic theology today? So yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it more like, okay, if you tune in from 8 to 8:30, you're gonna get a concert every single time. And then if you want the extra stuff, tune in after that or before that. So just a little update. Now, talking about theology, because on Sunday, well, for a while, I guess for a couple of days, I've been following the Amazon Synod, which is going on right now in Rome. And to me, I'm more of a traditional Catholic, so that there's some things going on there that seem a little off to me. And I'm not even going to comment on all of that. It's just, you can look it up yourself, Amazon Synod. There's a lot of information online, on Twitter, wherever you search. And there were a lot of problems from the get-go with the reason why they were having the meeting. Basically, a synod is a meeting of bishops of the Catholic Church, and they get together to talk about how they're going to make how they're going to make the church better. This meeting seems to be a little bit off the purpose, and it's worrying a lot of traditional Catholics who, it's not like, oh, traditional Catholics are against more so modern Catholics. It's not, that's not the case. It's just really the way you worship. It's not that one's better than the other, or one is, faithful and the other isn't. It's more about, okay, traditional Catholics mostly like the Latin Mass. They like, receiving communion while kneeling and on the tongue, whereas modern Catholics might like the English or the vernacular Mass. Maybe it's in English or Spanish, or whatever their language is, and they might receive in the hand or on the tongue, but usually standing, and they're not so concerned with the way the Mass is celebrated exactly and what language it's celebrated in, as long as they have access to our blessed Lord. And not that one way is better than the other. It's just that some people are more traditionally minded people, and some people are more modern minded people. I'm a fan of the traditional style. I personally do think it's better, but the modern methods aren't invalid unless the priest is doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And it's the same way with the Latin Mass. If the priest in the Latin Mass is doing something he shouldn't be doing, then it will become invalid, basically. I mean, it will still be efficacious for grace, but it's going to be something weird going on there. But so it's more so about what the priest is allowing than if it's a vernacular Mass or a Latin Mass, really. But the Latin Mass allows a lot less kind of, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Additions. The Latin Mass doesn't really allow for additions. There is a rubric, you go exactly by that, and there's nothing else. In the vernacular Mass, there is a lot of room for additions built into the Mass itself, so it's sometimes easier to veer off into strange territories that weren't exactly written down, because there is express permission to add things in, like people bringing up the gifts and which songs you're allowed to use and things like that. Whereas in the Latin Mass, that stuff is all written down. You have to do things this way. So it's a lot easier to keep it faithful. Not saying that it's the only faithful way, but yeah. Now that we have that out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit about the problem that I'm having with the Amazonian Senate, with a lot of the current leaders in the church, not all of them. There's lots of good ones like Cardinal Burke, Bishop Athanasius Schneider. Let's see who else is out there. Cardinal Sarah he's from Africa, and there's lots of good ones out there, but there's also lots of bad ones. And the problem that I was noticing is that some people aren't really trying to stay faithful. They're trying to change things, and the Senate that's happening right now is kind of about that. I'm not really going to get into that too much, but one question that a lot of people, Francis, does something extreme, something that is not in line with the tradition at all. And a lot of traditional Catholics are worried about that. Modern Catholics, not so much. They're like, whatever. And the right mindset that I read about today, which was very relieving for me, was it doesn't really matter. Like, the Pope is he has a job to do, like anyone else in the church, and if he does a bad job or a good job, it shouldn't really matter to the practice of your specific faith. Like the Pope, if he's a good Pope, then you should be, examining your conscience and confessing your sins regularly, going to Mass at least every Sunday, taking communion regularly. Whether he's a bad Pope, you should be doing exactly the same thing, examining your conscience daily, going to Mass every Sunday, if not more than that, taking communion regularly, going to confession. Like, whether the Pope is good or bad, you should be doing the exact same things, especially praying the rosary every day. But it didn't really hit me, it didn't really make sense to me like that until I read this really long article by Bishop Athanasius Schneider, which I will link in the show notes for the podcast listening people, and on YouTube, not on Facebook, because I don't link stuff on Facebook like that. But I am going to talk about the article, so if you were interested in that, then you'll hear about it. So while I was reading the article, I was basically live tweeting it while I was reading it. So I really like Twitter as more of for me, I use different social media channels for different purposes, and Twitter for me is more of a kind of, what thoughts am I having at that moment? I want to put them down so that I can go back later and look at them. And it really helps me out today because it kind of broke up that really long article, which is probably a 20 to 30 minute read, into short chunks that I can now kind of read back to give you the good nuggets, the good tidbits, and talk about it a little bit. So one thing people are worried about, more traditionalist Catholics are worried about, is hey, is the Pope, can the Pope be heretical? If he's heretical, will he still remain the Pope, or will the bishops and the cardinals have to depose him, or will he have to retire or something like that? And one thing that Bishop Snyder says is, the theory deposing heretical pope or the loss of his office ipso facto because of heresy is only a theological opinion that does not fulfill the necessary theological categories of antiquity, universality, and consensus. So he's basically saying that many people have had this idea, but it hasn't been it's a new idea, and people haven't had it all throughout the ages of the church, and we can only take actions in the church, like severe theological actions in the church, when it is based off of beliefs that everyone has had since the beginning of the church, or when it is defined dogmatically, like ex cathedra, but which would also only happen if everyone already believed it. So another quote he says is, a heretical bishop or a heretical pope, in spite of their heresies, can validly perform acts of ecclesiastical jurisdiction, and therefore do not lose ipso facto their office because of heresy. One thing that some people have been questioning is, hey, if the Pope preaches heresy openly, blatantly, no one can say he's anathema. They're not above him. He's the highest. He's basically I don't want to say king, because Jesus is the king of the Catholic Church. He's in charge. But the Pope is basically the viceroy. He's the second in command, and the only person who can depose him is Jesus. So it's even if he's in heresy, if Jesus hasn't deposed him, he's still in charge. He can still do all the priestly duties of the Pope. That's not really how it works. So it's what Bishop Snyder is saying. And a lot of people have been kind of swirling these ideas around. Some more traditional blogs and YouTube channels have been like, oh, well, if the Pope is in heresy, then, he'll cease to be Pope. It'll be, a vacant seat, a sede vacante, which is not, in my opinion, not a good idea at all. And there is a precedence for there not being a Pope, but no precedence for the Pope, like ipso facto not being the Pope anymore. That's just never ever happened before. And the only other time it happened that a Pope was anathema, or like he was excommunicated, was after death. So it was Pope Honorius the First, I think, and he basically exclaimed a heresy publicly, but he wasn't deposed. He died 4 years later, and after his death, the next pope and a few councils said, you know what he did was wrong. He's excommunicated after death. So we want everyone to know that a pope can speak heresy and teach heresy publicly, but that doesn't mean he's going to lose his position, because Pope Honorius did it, and after he did it, he was still Pope for 4 years until he died. And even after he died, it was the only time that they said he was a heretic, he's excommunicated, because they wanted to make it clear, like, the Pope was still the Pope, but his ideas were wrong. They want everyone to remember that you can't follow his ideas. So, moving on. So Bishop Snyder says the situation of a heretical pope will always be relatively short in comparison with the 2,000 years of the existence of the church. One has to leave an intervention in this rare and delicate case to divine providence. So I really liked this quote a lot. So basically what Bishop Snyder is saying is that if we do have a heretical pope, you don't have to worry, because think about the church in terms of how long it's been around, which has been, to this point, 2019 years at least. So if we have a heretical pope, like we had Pope Honorius the First, he was maybe heretical for 4 years out of however many years. It was 400 something years up to that point that the church had been in existence, and he was a heretical sitting pope for like 4 years. So if Pope Francis, for example, and I'm not saying he is, but I'm just giving an example, if he happened to teach heresy publicly, then he would still validly be pope, and maybe he would validly be pope for another maybe 8 to 10 years, maybe less, depending on his health. Who knows? But he's already up there in age, so maybe another 10 years at most. And in the grand scheme of things, that's not a long time at all. So Jesus could say that, okay, I want to just get rid of this person right away, or he could say, I'm going to let this play out, because I knew before this person even was elected pope what they were going to do, and I allowed them to be elected because there's some greater good that I can pull out of this. Just like there was a greater good that Jesus pulled out of his crucifixion, pulled out of Judas's betrayal of him, and pulled out of Peter's denial of him. He made all of that into good. So of course he can make one heretical pope like Pope Honorius the First into a good thing. And if there is another, and he allowed that, then there's a reason for that. And I don't think we need to get too worked up about the whole situation. We just need to, like St. Pio said, pray, hope, and don't worry, but especially pray the rosary. So, moving on. The next thing he says is, Catholics should not make the Pope and his words and actions their daily focal point. And this is something that I hadn't really thought of before, but a lot of people are just like, the Pope is just so important right now in a lot of people's minds, whether they're more modern or Catholics who are open to a lot of more new things, and they love the Pope because he's more open to new things, and he's kind of more hip and accepting mercy and all that. Or if you're more traditionalist and you're like, I'm tired of hearing about different things he's saying all the time. It's very similar to a Trump situation where people just either love him or hate him. There's no in between. It's really strange because both Pope Francis and Donald Trump kind of came in at a similar time frames. Pope Francis in about 2013, if I'm not mistaken, and President Trump in about 2016, so just about 3 years apart. But they've kind of been in their positions for similar periods of time, and people have similar reactions to both of them. I would say that Pope Francis is more leaning towards the left if you look at politics in that way, and not everyone does, but from an American standpoint, left means more liberal, more about the ideas of basically taking care of the environmentalism and taking extreme a look at how we should care for the poor and the people who are marginalized, basically racial and migrants and things like that. And the right side, would more conservative side, would say yes, we need to look into all those things and take care of all those things, but we need to do it in relation to like preserving what we already have. Like, we can't go to the extreme and say because environmentalism we need to get rid of oil and gas or whatever. We can't go to the extreme and say because there are migrants and people who need new homes that we should let everybody in. So the idea is, one idea from the American mindset, if you're listening from a different country, is that on the left, liberal side, you have more of a let's go to the extreme to fix the problems we have, and on the more conservative side, you have let's maintain what we have, which was really hard to build up, but also fix these problems. And I think that both sides kind of have a right way of going about it. Like, sometimes liberals are pointing out issues that conservatives might not have thought of, and sometimes conservatives are pointing out things that we need to maintain that liberals are not concerned with maintaining. Like, a lot of times liberal movements, like some liberal movements, have done a revolution and completely destroyed the country, and so have some conservative movements. But the point I'm making is the reasons why are very different. Long story short, if you would look at Pope Francis, it would be more of a liberal side, and if you would look at Trump, it would be more conservative side. It's not exactly black and white, but the point I'm getting at is they're very similar in that people love or hate them. There's no in between. It's not like you talk to somebody and like, oh, what do you think about Pope Francis? He's okay. I don't really think about him. Or what do you think about President Trump? I don't really think about it. It's love or hate. It's he's great or he's terrible. So I think that's just really interesting how that kind of played out. But that's neither here nor there. The point I'm getting at is what Bishop Schneider is saying is that you shouldn't make the Pope like his words and actions your focal point of your day. You should not even bother. You should just go about your faith life as you always would. Not to say that the Pope isn't important. He is a vicar of Christ. He is chosen by God to lead the church, but he shouldn't be changing your daily spiritual actions. You should be doing the same things every day. You should be examining your conscience daily. You should be going to Mass weekly on Sundays. At least you should be saying the rosary daily. You should be going to confession at least, once a month. Like, these things, like, it's not as if a new Pope is going to come up and say, okay, you guys only need to go to Mass every other Sunday. Like, there's certain things that the Pope literally can't change no matter how much he would like to. And those are the things that secure our entry into heaven, basically. Those things we should be doing no matter who the Pope or the Bishop or our local parish priest is. And that's something really hard to get a grasp of when you're dealing with these people every day. You deal with your local priest every day. You go to Mass regularly, and you're maybe looking at something that you don't like about the Mass that you feel is out of place. But the truth is that Jesus, for Catholics, Jesus is there, So that's the important part. So you kind of have to look at what in my faith life can I do that is not going to be affected by these other people. Yes, I need to go to Mass, and you try to go to the Mass that, I don't want to say suits your sensibilities, but that is reverent, that is fitting with the atmosphere of what, Jesus Christ would expect. You try to go to that Mass But if you can't, you just go to the closest one. If you don't have access to other masses, you still have to go. You can't say, well, I don't like that one, I'm not going to go. That's not how it works. So it's a similar thing with the Pope, which is there are things you need to do in your faith life, and you need to do them no matter if whoever the Pope might be. It's irrelevant who the Pope might be. You still need to do those things in your faith life to remain faithful to our blessed Lord Jesus Christ, not to any particular man, king, president, politician, famous actor, whatever. A couple more quotes here I'm going to talk about from Bishop Schneider, and then we're going to sign off. So the next quote I pulled from that article, he says, "The Pope cannot be deposed by anybody. Only God can intervene, and he will do this in his time, since God does not fail in his providence." And this is something a lot of people, a lot of traditional Catholics are forgetting, is that God is going to do what he needs to do to make things right in his own time. And what we see as the best good, we can only see right now in this present moment and in the past. We can't see in the future what the greatest good will come. And maybe 10 more years of Pope Francis will produce the greatest good in that 11th year. We have no idea. We can't see that. All we can see is right now things are crazy. And, for traditional people, they feel that way. For more modern people, they're like, oh, things are great, but not knowing that things could be much better, much more, the church could be in a much better position no matter how you slice the pie from a more modern mindset or a more traditionalist mindset. There are issues we can all agree on, such as the abuse crisis, and that lots of people are leaving the church, and those things could be improved. Everybody should be able to agree that those things can be improved. And who knows in the future what Jesus has in store, but he said he will never, he will never, I can't even think of the words, but he will never leave his church. The gates of hell will not prevail. And we need to remember that. So there's more quotes from that article, but I'm going to link the article because it's, that's pretty good for the podcast today. I'm going to kind of close it out. And thanks everybody for listening. Like I said, this kind of thing where I'm just doing other random things is going to be more of a behind the scenes extra portion of the podcast. And I'm thinking in the beginning probably I'm going to have 30 minutes of my live concert and every day so that there's some consistency with what I'm doing. But we're going to do our prayer and end it out. And that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Thanks everybody for tuning in, for listening, and in the meantime, in between time, stay holy, my friends. God love you, and peace out.